This video covers Blood Brothers from page 54 onwards, the end of the first act, where the Johnstone family also find that they're moving away, presumably as part of some slum clearance type scheme, to a new council estate, which is being built in the country. So, it begins where Mrs. Johnstone appears, clutching a letter and singing, "Oh bright new day, we're moving away." Of course, once again, the use of the song here, I think, is significant, in the sense that it is alienation. It reminds us of the theatricality of this play. Stops us, all the usual stuff. It stops us from identifying with characters. It stops us becoming completely absorbed in the action. It reminds us, as the narrator says, to judge for yourself. That's what we're doing all the time we see this. But also, if you look at this section here, it links to, well, the use of song itself is a Brechtian feature, but again, it's sparse, and we'll see a lot of that here. There's a lot of humour and things like that, even while actually it's touching on serious subjects. So, a bright new day, we're moving away. Look at the optimism there, the imagery of new days, new dawns, new beginnings, and so on. But because this is a tragedy, obviously, we know that this hope is doomed. We know that there will not be a happy ending for these characters, even though we might wish it to be so. Nicky says, "Ma'am, what's up?" And she sings, "We're starting all over again." It links back to the idea of the new day before. Donna Marie enters together with the various neighbours. Now, we haven't really had a section for Donna Marie. It probably is worth having a section for her as a minor character. Although actually there's probably a very small number of points that will relate to her, but I think several of the points that do relate to her are significant. Remember, she is one of the older, probably the oldest of the Johnstone children. So she says, "Is it a summons, mother?" A summons being a document compelling you to appear in court, often to do with unpaid bills, but it could be for any crime. We can link that directly, we can group that directly with Mickey, when one of his first questions to his mother that we see is, when he knocks at the door and she doesn't answer, is it the rent man? So we can group this directly with that. Once again, we have this idea of children who are forced to grow up, who are old before their time because of the poverty and the conditions that they live in, and that's a contrast to Edward, who we see actually remains quite childlike for a lot longer because of the relative security of his childhood. So Mrs. Johnstone continues, "Oh bright new day, we're going away," calls Sammy. Mrs. Johnstone addresses the various onlookers, singing when nobody's heard of our name. Sammy enters and says, "I never robbed nothing honest, ma'am." Once again, quotation there linking Sammy with crime. She continues, "Where we can begin again," link that to the idea of new beginnings we mentioned earlier. "Feel we can win and then live like living should be. But a new situation, a new destination, and no reputation following me." Nikki speaks, "What is it? What is it?" And she sings, "We're going out, we're moving house, we're starting all over again, we're leaving this mess for our new address," pointing it out, 65 Skelmersdale Lane. Now, Skelmersdale was one of something called the New Towns that were built in the years after the Second World War to house people being moved out of inner city slums by the local authorities, and Skelmersdale was one that was formed not far from Liverpool. Obviously, starting all over again, you've got that there. Notice again, as we said before, this idea that they use the idea of a physical journey, in this case from the perceived corruption of a town to the perceived innocence of the country, this sort of pastoral idea. We linked it back to the Merchant of Venice and this idea of the green worlds. But here Russell subverts it, because we know that while the characters may hope that this can help them, the reality is that it won't. Tragic conventions. We've seen the ending of the play at the beginning. We know. Anyway, it continues. Sammy says, "Is that in the country?" And Donna Marie, "What's it like there?" A little bit of social commentary there about the kind of narrow nature of working class life, this idea that they've not really travelled. Mrs. Johnstone actually echoes that same naivety and idealism when she sings, "The air is so pure you get drunk just by breathing, and the washing stays clean on the line. Where there's space for the kids because the garden's so big, it would take you a week just to reach the far side." Um, Not much to say there, other than again, it talks about the naivety of these ideals, reference to the pure air. The washing stays clean on the line is a reference particularly to the idea that it used to be common in cities that washing would get dirty from the pollution in the atmosphere while it was drying outside. That's what that's alluding to there. She carries on and says, "Come on, Sammy, Mickey, now you all got to help." The neighbours in a posh voice, "Will you excuse us? We've got a pack. We're moving away." Um, I think the posh voice here, again, it links to the idea of her sort of aspirations, her desire to move away from all these sort of trappings of the life that she's had so far. Anyway, they go in and they pack, and we now see a sequence of minor characters and neighbours. What did she say? Milkman, they're moving away, and then they all repeat, "Praise the Lord, He has delivered us at last," which I suppose is an interesting one if we think about the reaction of society to the most disadvantaged people in it, like the Johnstones. The fact that actually society is all too willing here to sort of be critical of them, to wish that they weren't there. When of course we know that Russell wants us to think that actually they're not the problem, they're just the helpless victims of this corrupt society that we live in. So it continues. The neighbour says they're getting out, they're moving the house, life won't be the same as in the past. Policeman says, "I can safely predict a sharp drop in the crime rate." The neighbour says it'll be calm and peaceful around here, and the milkman says, "And now I might even get paid what is mine, mate." And you'll see graffiti will soon disappear. Now, once again, Russell is talking about serious issues here, juvenile delinquency, crime, graffiti, and so on, but it's being done in a humorous fashion. It's sparse. He's using that to deal with the serious things, but in an entertaining way, in order that we can take note of the lessons, but without being too, without being, as it were, bored and put off by it. So, Mrs. Johnstone now marches out of the house, carrying battered suitcases, followed by the children who are struggling to get out some of the items mentioned in the verse. So I suppose here what we've got then is a brief section of montage where the characters act out what in mime what is being described in the verse. So she says, "Just pack up the bags while leaving the rags, the wobbly wardrobe, chest of drawers that never closed, two-legged chair, the carpet so bare you wouldn't see it if it wasn't for the holes. Now that we're moving, now that we're improving, let's just wash our hands of this lot. For it's no longer fitting for me to be sitting on a sofa I know for a fact that was knocked off." The last line is delivered to Sammy, who indicates the policeman trying to get her to shut up. Knocked off obviously means stolen, a further link to Sammy and crime. Now, we talked earlier in this play about images associated with working class life and about incompleteness. And of course, the most notable one was the idea of a bike with both wheels on. Well, I think here now we can group other symbols with that, like the idea of the two-legged chair, for example, or the carpet so bare. This idea that working class life is dominated, as it were, by the by material poverty, lack of material things. So it continues. Mrs. Johnstone says we might get a car, be all la-di-da, and go driving out to the sands at the weekend. The gentleman friend might take me dancing to the local bands. A car, I suppose, is a symbol of, at this time particularly, is a symbol of kind of middle class affluence, a symbol of having a little bit of disposable income. See the reference to dancing, which, as we know, is obviously associated with escapism in this sort of positive context. So it continues. Might take me dancing to the local band. We'll have a front room. A front room meaning another downstairs reception room that isn't the kitchen. Traditionally in working class households, the front room might only be used, for example, on a Sunday, or something like that. Um, but so this again, it's this idea of having disposable income, excess space in the house that you don't need to use for everyday living. Um, it's another measure, like the car. It's another sort of measure of the simple nature of the aspirations that they have. Um, she continues, and then if it should happen that His Holiness the Pope flies in from Rome, he can sit there with me, eating toast, drinking tea, in the sort of surroundings that remind him of home. Now there's a little joke for us all. Um, the idea that the Pope might have tea in someone's front room, but nonetheless, it shows the naivety, it shows the simple innocence of her expectations. And I suppose, if we're talking about Mrs. Johnson as being a good character, as we often do, then the idea that she would be pious, that she would have a faith in religion, in this case presumably Catholicism, is obviously something to bear in mind. So we carry on then. Mickey speaks and says, "It's like the country, isn't it, ma'am?" Which of course was the whole point of suburbs and new towns when they were built, meant to have all the supposed benefits of the countryside, but with connection to towns. And she speaks and says, "Hey, we'll be all right out here, son, away from the muck and the dirt and the bloody trouble. Hey, I could dance. Come here." Um, if we're talking about the nature of town versus country, then there's some good quotes there that would go with that. Muck, dirt, bloody trouble, linking to things like the idea of dirty washing on the line. What it might be worth perhaps at some point somewhere just forming some notes for portrayal of the town, portrayal of the country, and these are certainly some of the quotations that you could link in with that. Along with some of the other quotations from this section and from the earlier section where the lions move out as well. So it continues. Mickey says, "Get off." Mrs. Johnson picks up a picture of the Pope, which is lying next to one of the suitcases, and begins to dance, singing, "Oh, bright new day, we're moving away, we're starting all over again. Oh, bright new day, we're going away where nobody's heard of our name." So once again, we have that sense of refrain there. She speaks and says, "And what you laughing at?" As if, again, she's used to his sort of disrespectful or delinquent behaviour. He says, "I'm not laughing, I'm smiling. I haven't seen you happy like this for ages." Mrs. Johnson says, "Well, I am happy now. Hey, Jesus, where's the others?" "They went into that field, ma'am." And now here we have a little bit of more sparse. Sammy, get off that bleeding cow before I kill you." "Oh, Jesus, what's our Donna Marie stepped into?" "Sammy, that cow's a bull. Come here, the pair of you." It's comedically done, but I think here we have reference to the idea of the countryside again as being this kind of pastoral idyll. The proximity of animals, and so on. Again, it links this idea of it being an idealized place. And she sings again. "Now we can begin again, feel we can win, and then live just like living should be. On a new situation, a new destination, and no reputation following me." And then finally, they all sing together. "We're all getting out. We're moving house. We're going away. Getting out today. We're moving house." Mrs. Johnson sings, "We're going away. Oh, bright new day." And the curtain falls at the end of Act 2 on this note of optimism, on this note of hope. On some levels, we want to believe it, but of course, because we know the conventions of tragedy, because we know how this play ends, thanks to its beginning, we know that it's doomed. And so we feel that sense of dread on the behalf of the characters, because we know that this little transient moment of happiness that they're sharing, we know that it can't last.